The woman stood quietly in the living room while the other woman held a pregnancy test. Dennis Okafor's mother snatched it first. Her eyes widened. Then she shouted, "She's pregnant!" Denise's sister clapped her hands in excitement. "I knew it. I knew my brother was not the problem." The room suddenly filled with celebration. Only one person did not move. Princess. She stood near the doorway, hands folded, face calm, but inside her chest something was breaking. Dennis stood there too, silent. His mother turned slowly toward Princess. Her smile disappeared. "A barren woman has no place in my son's house." The words struck the room like a slap. Princess looked at Dennis. He avoided her eyes. "Dennis," she said softly. He said nothing. His sister laughed. 9 months in this house and nothing. But look at this one. Already carrying a child. Ngozi placed her hand proudly on her stomach. Denise's mother opened the front door. "Pack your things." Princess blinked. "Are you sending me away?" "You heard me," the woman said coldly. "This house needs a woman who can give us children. 2 men cannot live as husband and wife, and from all indications, you are not a woman." Princess turned to Dennis again. Her voice trembled. "Is this what you want?" Denise stared at the floor. Silence. And silence can be crueler than words. Princess nodded slowly. "I understand." She went into the bedroom, packed a small bag. When she returned, Ngozi was already sitting on the sofa like the new queen of the house. Denise's mother stepped aside and pointed outside. "Leave." Princess stepped into the street. The door closed behind her. Her footprint was swept after her by her sister-in-law as if she was a taboo. She kept quiet. She kept calm. She left. And slowly she faded from their views. What none of them knew was that Princess was already pregnant. Pregnant with the only child Dennis Okafor would ever father in this life. When Princess married Dennis Okafor, she believed she had found a good man, and for a while, she had. Dennis was gentle then, hard-working. He laughed easily. He held her hand when they walked. Princess loved him with the quiet loyalty of a woman who believed marriage was forever. She woke before sunrise to cook. She washed his clothes with care. She respected his mother. She treated his sister like family. But 9 months into the marriage, the whispers began. It started in the kitchen one afternoon. Dennis's mother spoke in a low voice to her daughter. "It's been 9 months. No pregnancy." His sister shook her head. "Something is wrong with that girl." At first, Denis defended his wife. "Stop talking like that," he told them. But his mother did not stop. "My son, open your eyes. A real woman does not take this long. I was carrying your father's child, you, before our 4th month of marriage. But this one, 9 months and still nothing." The poison spread slowly. Every day, another word. Another doubt. Another accusation. Over the following weeks, his behavior began to change. When she served food, he frowned. When she spoke, he sighed. When she smiled, he ignored her. At first, it was subtle, a distant tone, a colder glance. Then, the criticism started. The soup had too much salt. The house was not clean enough. She talked too little. She prayed too much. Nothing Princess did was right anymore. One night he said it aloud. Maybe my mother is right. Princess froze. What do you mean? Maybe you cannot give me children. The words crushed her. But she did not argue. She only prayed harder. But prayer could not silence the voices around Denis. At work, his colleagues spoke easily about their families. One man complained about his fourth child keeping him awake at night. Another laughed about the cost of school fees. The men teased Denis one afternoon during lunch. Okafor, when are we coming to eat rice at your son's naming ceremony? Denis forced a smile. Soon. But the laughter followed him long after the conversation ended. Even his closest friend joked one evening over drinks. My brother, you have been married almost a year. Are you sure everything is working in that house? The words stung more than Denis expected. He began to notice things he had never noticed before. Children playing in the streets. Fathers carrying babies on their shoulders. Pregnant women walking beside their husbands. Each sight felt like a quiet accusation. When Denis returned home, his mother was waiting. She had perfected the art of planting doubt without sounding cruel. My son, she said that evening while slicing vegetables in the kitchen, do you know how long it took me to give birth to you? Denis sighed. Mama, please. 9 months after my wedding, she said calmly. Your father never had to wonder if he married the right woman. Denis said nothing. The silence inside him was growing heavier every day. Soon he began coming home later. Sometimes he stayed out with friends after work. Sometimes he sat alone in small bars where nobody knew his name. It was easier there. Nobody asked him about children. Nobody compared his marriage to others. One evening, his friend Chike found him sitting alone with a drink. You look like a man carrying a coffin, Chike said. Denis laughed bitterly. My friend, you would laugh too if your mother believed you married a barren woman. Chike leaned back in his chair. Women like that exist, he said carelessly. Denis stared into his glass. I loved her, he said quietly. Chike shrugged. Love is sweet, my brother, but a man must think about his future, about his family name. Ha. The words settled into Denis's mind like wet cement. That night, Chike introduced him to a group of friends celebrating a birthday. The room was loud. Music filled the air. Drinks flowed easily. And that was where Denis first noticed Ngozi. She laughed loudly at something someone said. Her confidence filled the room. Unlike Princess, she did not lower her eyes when men looked at her. She looked back, directly. When Chike introduced them, Ngozi studied Denis for a moment. Then she smiled slowly. So you're the famous Denis Okafor, she said. Denis frowned slightly. Famous for what? Ngozi tilted her head. For being the only married man in this room who looks like he's carrying the whole world on his shoulders. Denis chuckled despite himself. You read people very quickly. She lifted her glass. Only the interesting ones. For the first time in many weeks, Denis felt something he had almost forgotten. Relief. Ngozi did not ask him about children. She did not ask him about his family. She only laughed at his jokes and listened when he spoke. And when the night grew late and the drinks grew stronger, Denis found himself telling her more than he had intended. My wife is a good woman, he said, but my family believes she cannot give me children. Ngozi looked at him with a softness that felt almost like sympathy. A man like you should not carry that kind of shame, she said quietly. Her words slipped into the cracks that had already formed in Denis's heart. And once a heart begins to crack, it does not take much for it to break. That was how Denis Okafor's life slowly turned toward Ngozi. Not in one moment, but step by step. Doubt, pressure, loneliness. And finally, temptation. Dennis did not realize how much he had revealed about himself that night, but Ngozi noticed everything. She noticed the way his shoulders dropped when he spoke about his marriage. She noticed the bitterness when he mentioned his mother. Most of all, she noticed the quiet shame in his voice when he talked about children. Ngozi had seen men like Dennis before, men who were not wicked by nature, men who were simply tired. Tired men were easy to influence. She leaned slightly closer to him across the small table. "So your wife cannot give you children," she said softly. Then he shifted in his seat. "I did not say that." You didn't have to," Ngozi replied. Her voice was gentle, almost sympathetic. "But I can see what it is doing to you." Dennis stared into his glass. "My family believes she is barren." "And what do you believe?" Dennis hesitated. I don't know anymore." Ngozi slowly shook her head. "A good man should not live with that kind of doubt." Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. "You work hard. You provide. You deserve peace in your own house." Dennis looked up. For weeks, he had only heard criticism, only pressure, only disappointment. But this woman spoke to him like he was the victim, and that was exactly what Ngozi wanted. She reached across the table and touched his hand lightly. "Some women don't understand the responsibility of marriage," she said, "but there are others who do." Her words were not loud, but they slid quietly into Dennis's mind. He did not notice the small smile that appeared briefly on her face when he looked away. Ngozi already knew something Denis did not. She had missed her last monthly cycle. She had taken 2 pregnancy tests that week. Both were positive, but she had no idea who the father was. 3 men, maybe 4. It did not matter. Because when Dennis leaned toward her that night and kissed her, Ngozi had already made her decision. If the child needed a father, Dennis Okafor would become that father. And Denis still believed he had found someone who understood him. Dennis slept with Ngozi that night. It happened in her small apartment after the bar closed. The alcohol made everything easier. The guilt came later, but by then it was too late. When Dennis returned home the next morning, Princess was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She looked up when he entered. Her eyes searched his face. "Where were you?" she asked quietly. "I was with Chaik." Denis lied. Princess nodded slowly. She did not argue. She had learned that arguing only made things worse. But something in Dennis's face told her the truth. His mouth would not speak. Still, she said nothing. She only returned to her cooking. And Denis walked past her into the bedroom. He told himself it was a mistake. One mistake. It would never happen again. But lies have a way of growing, and mistakes have a way of multiplying. Over the following weeks, Dennis stopped touching Princess entirely. He came home late. He slept in the bedroom. She slept in the small guest room. The distance between them grew wider every day. When she tried to speak to him, he barely responded. When she reached out, he pulled away. "I'm tired," he would say, and Princess would step back. She prayed every night that God would restore her marriage. But Dennis had already decided in his heart that his marriage was finished. He simply had not said it aloud yet. One evening, Dennis returned home very drunk. So drunk he could barely stand. Princess heard him stumbling at the door. She went quickly to help him. "Dennis, come, let me help you." He leaned heavily on her as she guided him to his bedroom. She removed his shoes. She loosened his shirt. She covered him with a blanket. As she turned to leave, Denis grabbed her wrist. His eyes were half closed. He pulled her toward him. "Stay," he mumbled. Princess hesitated. It had been months since he had touched her. Months since he had looked at her with anything other than coldness. But tonight, even in his drunkenness, he wanted her. And she still loved him. So she stayed. That night they were together as husband and wife. But Denis was barely conscious. Afterward, Princess lay still for a moment. Then she rose quietly. She covered Denis with the blanket and returned to her own room. She lay on her thin mattress, tears sliding silently down her face. She whispered a prayer into the darkness. "God, if you give me a child from this night, let it be the answer to everything." But she did not tell Denis, because by morning he would not remember, and the walls between them would grow even higher. What Princess did not know was that in that single moment, God had answered her prayer. A seed had been planted. A child had been conceived. The only child Denis Okafor would ever father. But it would be weeks before Princess discovered the truth. And by then, everything would have already fallen apart. 3 weeks later, Ngozi came to Denis's house. Princess opened the door. Ngozi stood there with a bright smile and a piece of paper in her hand. "Is Denis home?" she asked. Princess frowned slightly. "Who are you?" "A friend," Ngozi said smoothly. "Tell him Ngozi is here." Princess called Denis. When he appeared at the door and saw Ngozi, his face went pale. "What are you doing here?" he asked quietly. Ngozi's smile widened. "I came to show you something important." She held up the paper. It was a pregnancy test result. Positive. Denis's world tilted. What is that?" "I'm pregnant, Denis," Ngozi said clearly. "And it's yours." Princess stood frozen in the doorway. The words hit her like a physical blow. She looked at Denis. He could not meet her eyes. At that exact moment, Denis's mother and sister arrived for their usual visit. They walked up just in time to hear Ngozi's announcement. "Pregnant?" Denis's mother said sharply. "Who is pregnant?" Ngozi turned to face the older woman. "I am," she said confidently. "I'm carrying Denis's child." She handed the test result to Madame Elizabeth. The woman snatched it. Her eyes widened. Then she shouted, "She's pregnant." Denis's sister clapped her hands in excitement. "I knew it. I knew my brother was not the problem." The room suddenly filled with celebration. Only one person did not move. Princess. She stood near the doorway, hands folded, face calm, but inside her chest something was breaking. Denis stood there too, silent. His mother turned slowly toward Princess. Her smile disappeared. "A barren woman has no place in my son's house." The words struck the room like a slap. Princess looked at Denis. He avoided her eyes. "Denis," she said softly. He said nothing. His sister laughed. 9 months in this house and nothing. But look at this one, already carrying a child. Ngozi placed her hand proudly on her stomach. Denis's mother opened the front door. "Pack your things." Princess blinked. "Are you sending me away?" "You heard me," the woman said coldly. "This house needs a woman who can give us children. 2 men cannot live as husband and wife, and from all indications, you are not a woman." Princess turned to Denis again. Her voice trembled. "Is this what you want?" Denis stared at the floor. Silence. And silence can be crueler than words. Princess nodded slowly. "I understand." She went into the bedroom, packed a small bag. When she returned, Ngozi was already sitting on the sofa like the new queen of the house. Dennis's mother stepped aside and pointed outside. "Leave." Princess stepped into the street. The door closed behind her. Her footprint was swept after her by her sister-in-law as if she was a taboo. She kept quiet. She kept calm. She left, and slowly she faded from their views. Princess stayed with a friend for the first few days. Then she found a small room to rent. It was not much, one room with a shared bathroom down the hall, but it was hers. She cried only once, the night she moved in. She sat on the thin mattress on the floor and allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Her husband had betrayed her. His family had thrown her out. Another woman had taken her place, and she had nowhere to go. But after that one night of tears, Princess made a decision. She would not break. She found work as a tailor. Small jobs at first, hemming trousers for neighbors, sewing children's clothes, adjusting wedding dresses. Every naira she earned, she saved carefully. She ate little. She spent less. She attended church every Sunday and prayed every night. And she never spoke Denise's name with bitterness. When people asked, "Where is your husband?" she would say simply, "We are separated." Nothing more. No details. No anger. Just quiet dignity. 4 weeks after she left Dennis's house, Princess began to feel strange. Nausea in the mornings. Exhaustion by midday. Dizziness when she stood too quickly. Her friend noticed. "Princess, when last did you see your monthly cycle?" Princess paused. She counted backward in her mind. Her eyes widened. "Almost 6 weeks," she whispered. Her friend leaned forward. "Have you considered that you might be pregnant?" The word hung in the air like a fragile glass object. Pregnant. Princess's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. But Denis had not touched her in months. Not since. The memory came suddenly. That night. The drunken night. The only time. Could it be? I don't know, Princess said quietly. "How can I be sure?" "Go to the hospital," her friend urged. "Just check." The next morning, Princess went to a small clinic. She sat in the waiting room with her hands folded tightly in her lap. When the nurse called her name, her heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. The doctor, a kind older woman, examined her gently. Then she smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Okafor. You are pregnant." Princess stared at her. Are you sure?" "Very sure. About 6 to 8 weeks along." The doctor's voice seemed to come from very far away. Princess sat frozen. Then the tears came, not from sadness, but from something deeper. Relief, vindication, hope. "I'm not barren," she whispered. "I'm not barren." The doctor squeezed her hand. "No, my dear, you are not." Princess left the clinic in a daze. She walked slowly back to her small room, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. A child. Dennis's child. The child his family said she could never have. Princess placed her hand on her stomach. The child Dennis's family said she could never have was already growing inside her, but they had already thrown her out. And the woman who replaced her was already living in her house. What none of them knew was this. The woman in Denise's house was pregnant with another man's child. But the woman they threw out was carrying Denise's only son. The only child he would ever father. And 22 years later, the truth would finally be revealed. Part 2, coming soon.